I'm Nova.
I'm Alloy, and this is AgentStack Daily.
The useful AI story today stretches from an $8 board to a liquid-cooled 8-GPU server. In between, Codex has moved into the ChatGPT desktop app beside chat and work, with GPT 5.6 Sol as OpenAI's flagship for complex coding. Microsoft has a specialist cyber model working inside a security team of agents. A tiny open model can now answer simple requests on a microcontroller without the cloud. And new local coding models are pushing million-token context onto hardware that companies can own.
We'll connect those releases to things people can actually build: private document assistants, voice interfaces, smarter sensors, scientific tools, edge services, and robots that factory teams can tune without rewriting software. Then we'll look at the infrastructure and policy underneath it all: new chips, power limits for data centers, federal science funding, open-weight rules, and what a scraping lawsuit did and did not decide. 14 stories, plain language, and the practical meaning behind each one.
Microsoft has added a model called MAI Cyber 1 Flash to MDASH, its multi-agent system for finding and fixing software vulnerabilities. The important idea is specialization. One agent can inspect code, another can judge how dangerous a flaw is, and another can help prepare a patch. The new model is meant to be the fast security specialist inside that team, not a general chatbot pretending to be a security product.
That could matter to a company with thousands of repositories. A broad frontier model may be capable, but it can be expensive to point at every alert and every pull request. Microsoft says its specialist can match leading models on vulnerability work at roughly half the cost, while MDASH reaches 90% on its own task suite. Those are Microsoft's numbers, so they're a starting claim, not an independent verdict.
Picture the practical use. A small security team wakes up to hundreds of findings. The system groups duplicates, sends the serious ones to the specialist, proposes a repair, and gives a human the code change and the evidence behind it. That doesn't eliminate the security engineer. It moves the engineer away from sorting noise and toward deciding whether the proposed fix is safe enough to merge.
The missing proof is what happens on messy private code, not Microsoft's task suite. Teams should be able to trace which model found a bug, what evidence it used, and why the final patch changed those exact lines. If MDASH preserves that trail, this is a useful example of agents becoming a real security workflow. If it only produces confident answers faster, the lower price won't rescue it.
The open-source project ESP32RE puts a 28.9 million parameter language model on an ESP32S3 microcontroller that costs about $8. That's the chip family already hiding inside low-cost sensors, smart lights, and hobby robots. The repository is MIT licensed, so a builder can study it, change it, and sell a device around it. Its launch also drew hundreds of votes on Hacker News, which tells you the tiny model idea has moved beyond a laboratory curiosity.
What can something that small actually do? Not write a novel or reason through a legal case. It can understand a short command, turn a sensor reading into a simple explanation, choose from a few device actions, or answer a narrow question without contacting a server. A workshop tool could say why a temperature alarm fired. A classroom robot could respond to a student. A farm sensor could explain that its soil reading has crossed a threshold.
The offline part is the real feature. There's no cloud bill for every request, no dead device when Wi-Fi drops, and far less private data leaving the room. That changes which products are economical. A company can put a plain language interface on an appliance, toy, or industrial monitor without attaching a permanent subscription. It also gives developers a wonderfully visible way to teach model limits, because the constraints are impossible to hide.
And those limits matter. The responses will be short, the memory is tiny, and the model won't behave like a laptop assistant. Think of it as conversational glue between a person and a few sensors or controls. That's still a big shift. Local AI doesn't only mean a workstation with a giant graphics card anymore. It now reaches cheap objects that can quietly do one useful job for years.
NVIDIA has released a 3 billion parameter model called NVIDIA 4.2-3B under the Apache license, which allows commercial use. 3 billion parameters is a useful middle ground, much more capable than the microcontroller model we just discussed, but still small enough for a good laptop or compact workstation. It works with familiar local tools such as Ollama, LM Studio, MLX, and llama.cpp. It also includes templates for calling tools and a context window large enough to hold long documents or substantial code. That creates practical private builds, a contract assistant that stays on a lawyer's machine, a maintenance helper that searches years of manuals, or a coding assistant that can see more of a repository without uploading it. The publisher says NVIDIA beats larger Qwen models on 6 benchmarks, but that claim still needs independent testing. The better question is how reliably it uses tools, follows instructions over a long session, and stays useful after quantization. If community results hold up, the release gives local builders a capable new option without demanding server-scale hardware.
I like the size because it forces honest product design. A 3 billion parameter model won't be the best at every task, so the winning applications will give it the right documents, a small set of tools, and a clear job. Imagine an on-premises assistant for a repair shop. It reads the machine manual, looks up the current part inventory, drafts a service note, and asks a human before ordering anything. The business gets privacy and predictable cost, the model gets a narrow environment where it can succeed. That's more useful than treating every local release as a miniature frontier chatbot. What we need next isn't another benchmark graphic. We need reports from people using it in Ollama, MLX, and llama.cpp, how much memory it needs, how quickly it answers, and whether its tool calls remain dependable when the conversation gets long.
NVIDIA says its Vera CPU is already helping with the work of designing future NVIDIA chips. Cadence and Synopsys, the two companies behind much of the software used to lay out and verify processors, are tuning their tools for Vera. NVIDIA is also using the CPU internally. That creates a striking loop. A new chip helps engineers simulate and verify the chips that come after it. This work involves enormous design files and long calculations that repeatedly move data through memory, so CPU speed and memory bandwidth can shorten the time between a design idea and a verified result.
The story reaches beyond NVIDIA because chip design software is shared infrastructure. If Cadence and Synopsys make their tools measurably faster on Vera, another chip company using the same products could benefit without inventing a new workflow. Even a modest reduction in a verification run matters when engineers repeat it throughout the day and when a missed flaw can cost months. Faster feedback also lets a team explore more designs before it commits expensive manufacturing capacity.
What's missing is a public result from a normal customer project. NVIDIA's internal gains are interesting, but the useful evidence will be a Cadence or Synopsys customer showing how a real verification job changed, hours saved, more designs explored, or a problem found earlier. Still, the direction is clear. AI hardware isn't only serving models. The hardware and the design tools are beginning to accelerate one another, which could tighten the entire chip development cycle. OpenAI moved the dedicated Codex experience into the ChatGPT desktop app on July 9, where it now sits beside Chat and Work. That isn't a rename of ChatGPT, and Codex didn't become the GPT app. It's a consolidation. Conversation, longer-running work, and coding sessions can live in one desktop workspace. GPT 5.6 Sol is the flagship for complex coding, research, computer use, and security tasks, so this is the clearest place to ask what the new model generation changes in practice.
Two capabilities make the shift more than a new button. Programmatic tool calling lets Codex give a tool a small script that handles several steps instead of spending a model turn on every tiny action. That can make a multi-step analysis faster and cheaper. The multi-agent beta can split a larger job into parallel workers, so one session might inspect data while another builds the interface.
OpenAI's scientific computing report supplies 8 concrete examples. 5 projects used Codex alone, and 3 used Codex with Claude Code, the terminal-based AI coding agent. The work includes genomics pipelines, experiment interfaces, and long data analysis jobs. One CYVCF2 example used GPT 5.5, so it's not evidence that Sol produced that result and shouldn't be sold as a Sol benchmark. The broader signal is that researchers can move from a rough notebook to a usable tool with less hand-built software around it.
Imagine a biologist with variant data and a notebook only its author understands. An agent can help turn that into a repeatable pipeline and a simple interface the lab can use. A researcher can also delegate the tedious parts of comparing many runs while staying responsible for scientific judgment. That's the improvement worth watching. Not AI does science alone, but scientists spending less time stitching files and scripts together. The next proof should come from outside OpenAI, including how much expert review the output needed.
The Department of Energy's Pacific Northwest National Laboratory and Amazon Web Services are exploring AI decision support tools for the electric grid. They're focusing on the moments operators dread: severe weather, an unexpected demand spike, or a cyber or physical attack that knocks important equipment offline. The aim is to give people a faster view of what's happening and a better set of options while keeping humans in control of the actual switching decisions.
That distinction is reassuring. This isn't an autonomous model getting the keys to a substation. It's planning and validation work. PNNL can model large parts of the grid and connect software to hardware in controlled conditions. AWS contributes the computing capacity needed to simulate many failure scenarios. Together they can ask whether an AI suggestion still looks sensible when one failure triggers another across a region.
Here's the practical picture. During a heat wave, demand jumps while a transmission line is damaged. An operator has minutes to understand which neighborhoods, hospitals, and factories are at risk. A useful assistant could bring together weather, equipment, and demand data, then show several possible responses and the likely consequences of each. The operator still makes the call, but doesn't have to search 5 systems while the situation gets worse.
Grid resilience crosses utilities, states, and regulators, so a national lab can test conditions that one smaller operator couldn't reproduce alone. The next important output would be public scenarios and measurements that other experts can review. Until then, nobody can buy this as a finished control room product. It's still meaningful that critical infrastructure AI is moving from broad promises into structured exercises where a bad recommendation can be exposed before it reaches the real grid.
Black Forest Labs has published SelfFlow, a research project with public code that asks whether one foundation model can learn to generate several kinds of media instead of relying on a separate specialist for each one. The useful summary is simple. Today's multimodal product often resembles a cabinet full of appliances. One model handles images, another handles audio, another handles video, and a layer of software moves work between them. SelfFlow explores whether more of that can live inside one adaptable system. Nothing here is a finished product, and there's no reason for a normal team to replace a working media stack with research code. But the direction could matter. A unified model might preserve ideas more consistently as a project moves from text to images to other outputs, and it could reduce the number of services a builder has to pay for and maintain. Think of a small studio creating a product campaign. One brief becomes copy, visuals, and short motion pieces without every step feeling like a translation between unrelated tools. The public code lets researchers inspect the approach rather than accepting a demo on faith.
The caution is that one model does everything can also mean one model is merely adequate at everything. Specialized tools may keep winning where quality matters most. So the story isn't that multimodal stacks have suddenly collapsed into a single download. It's that a serious generative AI lab is testing a simpler future and showing its work. Builders should watch for the follow-up that turns the research into an actual release, then compare cost, consistency, and control against today's specialist pipeline. If that release arrives, it could make rich media creation easier for smaller teams. If it doesn't, the project still teaches us where unified generation breaks down.
Serve the Home has published a hands-on look at an ASRock rack server that fits 8 NVIDIA HGX B300 accelerators into a 4-rack unit chassis. This is the kind of machine used for serious model training and very large inference jobs. The value of the review isn't another speed chart. It shows the physical reality behind the phrase AI server: dense power delivery, fast links between GPUs, cooling hardware, and network capacity all have to work as one system.
HGX connects the accelerators much more tightly than 8 ordinary add-in cards. That lets them share work as if they were parts of one large computer, but only when data can move quickly enough. If the links between GPUs or out to storage are slow, expensive chips spend their time waiting. That's why the surrounding fabric matters as much as the logo on the accelerator.
Then there's heat. One option sends liquid close to the chips and removes heat efficiently, but the data center has to be plumbed for it. Another option is easier to install in a conventional room but shifts more work onto facility cooling. Either choice affects the building, the power budget, and what can fit in the next rack. For a company planning private AI, that changes the buying order. First decide what power, cooling, and network the site can support. Then choose the model and accelerator system that fit. The practical lesson is wonderfully unglamorous. At this scale, the server room is part of the AI architecture, and a pile of premium GPUs is not a complete product. Verizon is pitching itself as more than a phone company by pairing small data centers with an agreement worth roughly $1 billion for Google Dark Fiber. Dark fiber is simply optical cable that has already been laid but isn't carrying a signal. A company leases the raw strands and lights them with its own equipment, giving it more control over the route, capacity, and cost than buying ordinary finished bandwidth.
Why does that connect to AI? Some applications can't wait for every request to travel to a distant regional cloud and back. Real-time voice, live video understanding, fraud decisions, and robot controls all feel worse when the delay grows. If compute sits in a smaller facility near the customer, a carrier needs fast, predictable fiber connecting that facility to the rest of the network. Verizon already has streets, buildings, and network operations. Dark fiber fills in the high-capacity paths.
A useful example is a store using many cameras to spot an empty shelf or a safety problem. Sending every video stream across the country is costly and slow. A nearby mini data center could analyze the streams, send only the relevant event onward, and keep responding if a distant region is congested. The same pattern could support a factory, hospital, or interactive voice service.
The billion-dollar agreement is still an infrastructure bet, not proof that customers are lining up. The next evidence should be named deployments and details about what Google plans to carry over those links. But it shows where the edge AI competition is moving. Model quality still matters, yet the company that owns the nearby compute and the path to it may decide whether a product feels instant, affordable, and reliable.
Robotics startup Enigma has raised $71 million in a seed round led by Index Ventures and Ribbit Capital. Its pitch is refreshingly easy to picture. Changing how much a robot decides for itself should feel more like moving a slider than rewriting the autonomy software. A warehouse supervisor could ask a robot to pause for approval on unusual boxes during a new product launch, then allow more independence after the process is stable.
That addresses a real bottleneck. Industrial robots may be powerful, but a behavior change often goes through a small engineering team. A new package shape, gripper, or safety rule can start another tuning cycle. If a floor manager can adjust a well-defined level of autonomy while the system records the change, a factory can adapt faster without pretending every employee is a robotics engineer.
The idea is compelling. The public evidence is still thin. Reporting doesn't name pilot customers, supported robot hardware, or exactly which behaviors the control can change. Physical systems also raise a harder question than software. Who is responsible when the robot does something unexpected? Enigma will need clear limits, an audit trail, and a safe way to hand control back to a person. The funding is a strong vote for the interface idea, not proof that the product has solved those problems. Still, it points toward a broader shift in robotics. The next wave may be won not only by the smartest autonomy model, but by the product that lets ordinary operations teams understand and shape that intelligence without waiting weeks for a code change. The Department of Energy's Genesis mission now includes 20 federal departments and agencies, with groups such as NASA, the National Institutes of Health, and the National Science Foundation taking part. The practical promise is shared access. A researcher usually competes inside one agency's grant system and works under that agency's data and computing rules. A coordinated program could connect national lab computing, scientific datasets, and funding across those boundaries. That could help a small university team take an AI tool for materials, climate, medicine, or astronomy from a promising prototype to an experiment at national scale. The first awards have begun, so this is more than a summit announcement, but the hard work is just starting. Data collected for different missions won't automatically line up. Agencies will disagree about priorities, privacy, credit, and who pays to clean the information. The most revealing signal will be whether future awards genuinely cross agency lines or simply place a shared banner over familiar projects.
There's also a public interest opportunity here. Private frontier labs control much of the best AI infrastructure, while national laboratories hold extraordinary scientific equipment and data. Genesis could give researchers another path to build useful tools without every project depending on a commercial platform. Imagine a climate group combining satellite observations, grid data, and a national lab simulation, or a medical team getting enough compute to evaluate a model across institutions. That's exciting, but only if access is broad and the results can be examined. We should look for shared datasets, published measurements, reusable models, and clear rules about sensitive information. 20 logos on a slide show political reach. The lasting story will be whether scientists who couldn't previously reach these resources can now do work that changes what we know.
Anthropic has published its formal position on open-weight models, the releases whose trained parameters can be downloaded and run by other people. The company isn't arguing that every open model should disappear. It recognizes the benefits. Independent researchers can inspect behavior, startups can build without paying a frontier lab for every request, and organizations can keep sensitive work on their own hardware.
Anthropic's concern is the very top of the capability range. Its position is that releasing the most powerful weights can create security and geopolitical risks that are hard to reverse, because a downloaded model can't be recalled or limited in the same way as a hosted service. Chief Executive Dario Amodei also connects that concern to competition between the United States and China. That makes this a policy argument, not a new product restriction or a law.
For someone choosing a local model now, almost nothing changes overnight. The practical questions are still the license, where the model will be hosted, what data it will touch, and whether hardware or export rules apply. Smaller and specialized open models are likely to keep arriving. The disagreement is about where powerful enough to be dangerous begins, who measures that capability, and whether every company should draw the same line.
That line will shape what builders can own instead of rent. Too low, and open research and local deployment could be needlessly constrained. Too high, and a genuinely dangerous capability could spread before anyone understands it. Anthropic has put one frontier lab's view on the record, which gives governments and competitors something concrete to challenge. The next consequential step isn't another opinion page. It's whether the industry develops clear release levels and credible evidence for moving a model from one level to another.
Google's lawsuit against SERP API, a service that turns search results into structured data for developers, was dismissed. The tempting headline is scraping one, but that isn't what the court decided. Google brought a claim under part of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, and the court said Google hadn't shown that it owned, exclusively licensed, or represented the material at issue. In legal language, Google lacked standing for that claim.
So the judge didn't rule that scraping is broadly legal, and didn't decide the deeper question of whether SERP API bypassed a protected access control. A similar case from Reddit was still moving through court. Two lawsuits can involve the same company and still reach different stages because the plaintiffs, content, contracts, and technical barriers aren't identical.
Builders need to separate several ideas that often get mashed into one word. Robots.txt is a signal telling compliant crawlers where a site doesn't want them to go. It isn't itself a technical lock or an automatic law. Terms of service are a contract question. Copyright depends on what content is copied and who owns it. Authentication, rate limits, and other barriers can raise different issues. Winning or losing on one gate doesn't settle the others.
That matters for search tools, retrieval products, competitive intelligence, and training data pipelines. The safe conclusion isn't scrape anything, and it isn't all scraping is dead. It's that rights and access have to be evaluated source by source. The SERP API dismissal narrows this particular Google case while leaving the larger legal fight unresolved. Anyone building on web data still needs permission, provenance, and a clear understanding of how the source actually makes that data available.
OpenAI has published research about how people use ChatGPT at work, and the most interesting finding isn't a simple replacement story. Workers often use it to cross the edges of their formal role. A marketing employee may draft copy, analyze a small dataset, write a light script, and prepare a client email in the same afternoon. A developer may explain a feature to customers instead of handing every sentence to a communications team. ChatGPT can smooth the seams between those tasks, especially in a small organization where specialists aren't always available. That suggests products should support a person moving through a whole job, not force a fresh app and context for every category of work. It also suggests managers may spend more time reviewing mixed work and less time assigning tiny pieces to separate people.
But broader activity isn't the same as better output. OpenAI found a pattern. It didn't prove ChatGPT caused the pattern, improved quality, or reduced the need for jobs. People who already like crossing role boundaries may simply be more likely to use the tool. And OpenAI benefits from an expansive interpretation of its product, so this should be one data point alongside independent workplace research. The question worth asking inside a real company is concrete: are people completing useful work they couldn't do before, and do experts still catch the important mistakes? If the answer is yes, AI may change job design before it changes job counts. Teams could hire for judgment, curiosity, and the ability to combine disciplines, while using the model for the first pass across unfamiliar territory. That's a much richer story than one bot replaces one title.
3 repositories connect the ideas in this slate. Hugging Face's speech-to-speech stack added WebRTC support for OpenAI's real-time API, making a live voice interface easier to attach to an agent without building the streaming transport from scratch. Microsoft's Agent Governance Toolkit added native policy runtime sessions, giving tool-using agents a place to enforce permissions and preserve a session boundary. Together they cover the front door and the guardrail, how a person talks to an agent, and how the agent is limited after it hears the request.
Cheap Security covers the physical world. It turns a Linux single-board computer and USB webcam into a privacy-first camera system with local recording, motion detection, alerts, and optional telegram delivery. A builder could use its motion event as the trigger for a local agent, then apply a governance policy before that agent sends a message or touches another tool. That's more interesting than 3 isolated repositories. Voice, policy, and local sensing can form one understandable product without requiring a cloud surveillance platform.
Qwen 3.7 Flash appeared with a million-token context window and vision language reasoning through OpenRouter. It's relevant for multimodal agents, visual coding, search, and computer interaction, but it's a variant of a model family covered recently rather than a new frontier event. We're keeping it on the watch list instead of inflating a routine listing into a main story.
The local spotlight is Poolside's Laguna S2.1, a coding mixture of experts model with 118 billion total parameters and about 8 billion active for each token. It supports a million-token context window and practical formats for VLLM, SGLang, TensorRT-LLM, transformers, and Llama.cpp.
Be honest about the word local. This is workstation or server scale, not a laptop model. The full weights are roughly 236 gigabytes before quantization. For a team that needs private, on-premises coding help, it's worth evaluating. For a normal notebook computer, Nanbeige is the more realistic story. 3 quick signals. Argonne uses AI transformers to improve nuclear reactor simulations, reducing time spent on demanding fluid calculations. Fish Audio raises $52 million after voice models reach 8 million users, showing synthetic voice is becoming a substantial product market. And PJM plans temporary power cuts for the largest data centers during shortages beginning in 2027.
They share a constraint story. Argonne uses AI to make scarce scientific compute go further. Fish Audio's growth makes consent and licensing more important as voice scales. PJM is telling large AI facilities that grid access can be interrupted, pushing operators toward backup generation and serious power planning.
The full story list and primary links are in the show notes at tobyonfitnesstech.com.
Thanks for listening to AgentStack Daily. We'll be back soon.